Good morning/afternoon/evening, everyone. Let me start with a hard truth. Success does not come from what you do occasionally. It comes from what you do consistently. Now, most people believe consistency is about willpower or motivation. But let's get clear. Consistency is biology. It's neurochemistry. If you understand how your brain and body function, you can design consistency into your life, not by accident, but by force. And yes, sometimes you'll have to force it. When we talk about consistency, we often frame it as a character trait, something you either have or you don't. But what's really happening is far more biological. Every time you repeat a behavior, your brain is adjusting. It's literally reshaping itself through a process called neuroplasticity. This is your nervous system's way of wiring in patterns based on what you do often. Think of it like carving a path in the snow. Each time you walk it, the trail gets deeper, easier to follow, more automatic. But there's more to it. At the core of this process is dopamine, the neurotransmitter most people associate with pleasure. But its real power is in motivation and reinforcement. When you complete a task, especially one that required effort, your brain rewards you with a small hit of dopamine. That signal doesn't just feel good. It says, that was important, do it again. So when you perform a behavior consistently, even something as simple as making your bed, writing a sentence, or finishing a workout, you're not just building discipline, you're literally rewiring your brain to crave that behavior. And the more often you repeat it, the more sensitive your dopamine system becomes to that specific action. That's how consistency builds momentum. It's not magic. It's not luck. It's chemistry. Here's the key takeaway. Your brain doesn't reward what's hard. It rewards what's repeated. You don't get dopamine because something was epic or life-changing. You get dopamine because you showed up again and again. That's how the loop forms. And that loop, if you're intentional about it, can drive long-term change at the biological level. There's a common trap that almost everyone falls into at some point, waiting for motivation. We tell ourselves we'll act when we feel ready, when we're inspired, when the timing feels right. But that's not how your brain is wired to create lasting change. Motivation is fleeting. It's based on how you feel in a given moment, and your feelings are affected by everything from your blood sugar levels to your sleep to random external triggers. In other words, motivation is unstable. It's chemically inconsistent. Discipline, on the other hand, is what kicks in when motivation fails. It's the internal structure that tells your body and brain, we do this no matter what. It's the system that overrides your emotions, your doubt, your laziness. When you build discipline, you're not relying on feeling good or being excited. You're relying on behavior patterns, on a pre-committed plan that you follow because it's part of your identity, not your mood. From a neuroscience perspective, discipline works because it reduces the need for cognitive negotiation. If you wake up and ask yourself, do I feel like going to the gym? Your brain is already looking for a way out. That question creates mental friction, but if the decision has already been made, if it's a non-negotiable part of your daily routine, your brain doesn't waste energy debating, it just executes. Over time, this consistency builds trust between your conscious mind and your nervous system. You teach yourself that showing up isn't optional, and your brain adapts. The neural circuits responsible for resistance get quieter. The circuits for execution get stronger. That's when you know you've crossed a line, when doing the thing becomes easier than skipping it. Not because it got physically easier, but because your system no longer gives you a way out. The bottom line is this: if you rely on motivation, you will be inconsistent. If you build discipline, you will be unstoppable. One of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to build consistency is aiming too big, too soon. They set massive goals, thinking that scale equals success. But from a neurological standpoint, the brain doesn't care how big the achievement is. It cares that the action was completed. It's completion, not intensity, that triggers the reward system, specifically the release of dopamine. This is where small wins become powerful. Every time you complete a small task, making your bed, writing a single paragraph, going for a 10-minute walk, you get a slight but important spike in dopamine. That spike acts like a vote for the identity you're trying to build. It's a chemical signal that says, "I'm making progress." Even if the action seems minor, stack enough of these signals and you begin to develop momentum, not because of one grand breakthrough, but because your brain starts associating effort with reward. Small wins also build psychological safety around the habit. They lower the barrier to entry. If the task feels manageable, your brain is less likely to resist it. That lowers internal friction and makes it easier to repeat the behavior tomorrow and the next day. You're reducing decision fatigue by reducing the perceived cost of action. And the nervous system, when given a choice between ease and effort, will almost always choose the path of least resistance. By designing small, repeatable wins, you're giving your brain the path it actually wants to follow. Over time, those tiny efforts begin to add up in a compounding way. What starts as a 2-minute habit becomes a 10-minute ritual. What starts as a single rep becomes a training session, and because each step forward is reinforced by the brain's reward system, you're not forcing yourself anymore. You're training your system to crave the process. So the key isn't to go hard. The key is to go often. It's not about how much you do in a day. It's about how often you show your brain that doing is better than delaying. One of the most overlooked variables in staying consistent is time, specifically aligning your habits with your body's natural rhythms. Your brain and body don't operate on a flat, 24-hour energy curve. Instead, they follow a biological system called the circadian rhythm, which governs everything from alertness to focus to hormone release. In the first few hours after waking, especially within 1 to 4 hours, your system experiences a natural rise in cortisol, a hormone that, when timed correctly, helps promote focus and readiness. This window is one of the most neurologically and hormonally primed periods of your day. Your body is already in a state of elevated alertness, and your brain is more capable of engaging in deliberate effort. So if you're trying to build a habit, whether it's writing, training, studying, or planning, the morning hours are your leverage point. Waiting until the evening when willpower is low, glucose is depleted, and stress has accumulated, sets you up for inconsistency. Your nervous system is less responsive. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational decision-making, is fatigued. That's when distractions win and discipline loses. This doesn't mean you need to completely overhaul your life and become a 4 a.m. person, but it does mean you should protect your high-focus hours. Use that early window to tackle the things that matter most, the things that often require the most resistance to overcome. The brain, when activated at the right time, is an incredible ally. When used at the wrong time, it becomes your biggest obstacle. It's not just about doing the right thing, it's about doing the right thing at the right time. When you align your actions with your biology, you reduce resistance, conserve willpower, and make consistency feel more natural, not forced. This is how high performers operate. They don't rely solely on discipline. They harness timing. And the truth is, consistency gets a lot easier when you're not working against your own physiology. Consistency doesn't just come from motivation or timing. It comes from designing your environment to reduce friction in the right places, and just as importantly, to increase friction in the wrong ones. If something is easy to skip, your brain will eventually skip it. That's not a personal flaw. It's basic evolutionary wiring. The nervous system is built to conserve energy and avoid unnecessary effort. So if your brain sees an opportunity to avoid discomfort without consequence, it will take it. That's why you have to engineer your surroundings and your systems to make inconsistency more difficult than consistency. One way to do that is through habit tracking, a simple calendar, an app, or even a notebook. The act of checking off a completed habit might seem trivial, but it creates a visible chain, and once that chain is visible, your brain starts attaching meaning to it. Breaking the chain doesn't feel like skipping a task, it feels like losing progress. That's a powerful psychological shift. Another strategy is public or social accountability. When other people know what you're committed to, whether it's a workout routine, a project, or even a morning ritual, you've created a social cost for inconsistency. Humans are wired to avoid embarrassment and seek social approval. When used correctly, this isn't manipulation. It's leveraging basic neuropsychology to your advantage. You can also increase the friction around quitting by making the alternative inconvenient. For example, if you want to reduce your chances of skipping morning workouts, sleep in your gym clothes and place your shoes by the door. Now inaction requires deliberate avoidance. You've created a environment where the path of least resistance is the one that supports your habit. Your nervous system adapts to pressure, but if there's no consequence for skipping the behavior, no reinforcement for staying on track, the neural circuitry doesn't strengthen. So build systems that reward the right behavior and make deviation cost something, even if that cost is just a visual break in your momentum. Consistency is not just about showing up. It's about making sure not showing up feels wrong. There's a powerful mechanism in the brain that most people underestimate when it comes to building consistency: mental rehearsal. Visualization isn't just a motivational trick, it's a neurological training tool. When you mentally walk through a behavior, especially in vivid detail, your brain activates many of the same neural circuits that would be engaged if you were doing the task physically. This means that even imagining yourself being consistent strengthens the pathways required to actually follow through. Elite performers, from athletes to surgeons, have used this for decades. Why? Because the nervous system doesn't perfectly distinguish between real action and imagined action. If you consistently visualize yourself waking up, putting on your shoes, and going for a run, your brain starts to treat that as a familiar sequence. When the real moment arrives, there's less resistance, less hesitation, because neurologically, you've already done it. You've primed the circuitry for execution. This is especially useful when trying to change deeply ingrained habits. You might struggle to show up physically in the beginning, but you can start by showing up mentally. And that still counts. You're creating a cognitive blueprint for success, a template that makes the action easier when the opportunity comes. You can take this further by pairing mental rehearsal with emotion. Don't just visualize the steps, visualize the feeling. Feel the sense of pride after you complete the task. Feel the discomfort of pushing through resistance. Feel the identity forming as someone who follows through. This emotional component boosts engagement of the brain's limbic system, which helps consolidate memories and reinforce habits. So even on days when life throws chaos at you, when your schedule breaks or your energy dips, you can still show up in your mind. And that in itself keeps the chain alive. It tells your brain, this still matters, this is who I am. Over time, the gap between intention and action narrows. In the end, it's not just about doing the thing, it's about becoming the kind of person who does it, and mental reps are a direct route to that transformation. So here's the truth: consistency isn't a mystery. It's not a talent, it's not something reserved for the ultra-disciplined or genetically lucky. It's a system, built on biology, shaped by behavior, and reinforced by repetition. You don't need to wait to feel ready. You don't need to feel inspired every morning. What you need is structure. What you need is alignment between your brain's natural rhythms and your daily actions. What you need is to make small wins matter, to visualize success before it happens, and to create a life where not showing up feels unnatural. Every day you show up, you're not just getting something done, you're rewiring your brain to make future action easier. You're building momentum at the cellular level, and the moment you stop asking if you feel like it, and instead start acting as if it's already part of who you are, that's when consistency becomes inevitable. Force it at first, do it consciously, relentlessly, and eventually what felt forced will feel automatic. That's how you win, not with bursts of motivation, but with repeated, deliberate action, anchored in who you're becoming. Thank you.